All right, let's get into it. We're going to unpack the incredibly complex and frankly disturbing story of Jeffrey Epstein. It's a wild saga of money, power, and horrific crimes that still hangs over some of the most famous people on the planet.
So let's start with the event that blew this whole thing wide open. August 10th, 2019. Jeffrey Epstein is found dead in his cell. A maximum security cell, mind you. Now the official story? Suicide. But that's where the real mystery begins, isn't it? Because the big question that everyone started asking was it really suicide? Or was he silenced?
And believe me, there's a good reason those questions haven't gone away. The whole thing just doesn't add up. First off, the security cameras pointing at his cell, they just happened to malfunction that night. The two guards who were supposed to be watching him, they were asleep. And get this, the most unbelievable part. He had been taken off suicide watch right before he died. You see why people are suspicious? It all leads to one massive question. What did this guy know? And who would have wanted to shut him up for good?
So, to even begin to answer that, we've got to rewind. We need to understand who Jeffrey Epstein even was. How does a guy like him build an empire that put him in the same room as the most powerful people in the world?
You know, his story starts in a pretty unexpected place. He was a math teacher. Yep, a math teacher, at a fancy private school back in the 70s. But that wasn't his endgame. Nope. He made the leap to Wall Street. And he had this incredible knack for getting billionaires to trust him. People like Leslie Wexner, the guy behind Victoria's Secret. He managed their money, took huge commissions, and bit by bit built this insane network from scratch. And wow, did he spend that money. We're not just talking about a nice house. He built a whole empire of properties. I mean, listen to this. The biggest private mansion in all of Manhattan. A ranch in New Mexico that was 75,000 acres, a luxury pad in Paris, and of course, the one everyone knows about, his private island in the Caribbean. And that island, Little St. James, this was the centerpiece of his whole operation. A 72-acre slice of paradise that was actually the dark, beating heart of his entire criminal enterprise. It was on that island and on his private jet, which had the disgusting nickname the Lolita Express, that so many of the horrible things we've heard about allegedly happened.
But look, the fancy real estate, that was just the backdrop. The real source of Epstein's power, the thing that probably protected him for so long, was his little black book, his guest list. It was an absolutely jaw-dropping who's who of the global elite.
I mean, the level of his influence is just staggering. You've got former presidents like Bill Clinton on his jet, friendships with people like Donald Trump. And then there's the really infamous one, Prince Andrew from the British royal family, whose connection to Epstein basically ended his public life and cost him millions in a settlement. And the list just keeps going. Tech billionaires, movie stars. This wasn't just a group of friends. It was a human shield of power and credibility. So you have to wonder, right? How did he keep all these powerful people in his orbit? Well, here's the theory. When the FBI finally raided his mansion, they found a ton of CDs and photos, and that immediately led to massive speculation that maybe Epstein wasn't just throwing parties. Maybe he was collecting dirt, blackmail material, a way to make sure everyone stayed quiet and played along.
Because behind all that glitz, all that power, was something truly dark. A carefully constructed criminal operation built on the systematic abuse of young girls.
And this is crucial. He wasn't acting alone. Not by a long shot. His main partner in crime was Ghislaine Maxwell. Think of it this way. Epstein might have been the boss, but survivors and prosecutors say Maxwell was the one who built the whole recruitment system. She was the one who used her high society status and charisma to find vulnerable girls and pull them into this nightmare.
For years, this whole ugly system just operated completely under the radar. But then, in 2005, the first crack appeared. An incredibly brave young woman named Courtney Wild did what so many were afraid to do. She went to the police. She filed the very first report, and that single act of courage started a domino effect that would, eventually, bring the whole thing down.
But the road to justice was anything but straight. In fact, Epstein's first real run-in with the law ended in what a lot of people call one of the biggest failures of the justice system ever.
Look, the evidence against him was overwhelming. He should have been looking at life in prison, period. But that's not what happened. Instead, back in 2008, a federal prosecutor named Alexander Acosta cut a secret plea deal with him. A sweetheart deal, they called it.
It was done without the victims even knowing, and it protected not just Epstein, but anyone else involved from any federal charges. It was unbelievable.
So what did he get for all of this? Not life. Not even close. He was sentenced to just 18 months, and he only served 13 of them. 13 months! And even that was a joke. He got VIP treatment with work release. That meant he could leave the jail for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and just go to his office. It's insane. But that wasn't the end of the story. The victims and journalists didn't give up. For 10 years, the fight kept going. And then, in 2018, a journalist named Julie K. Brown dropped an absolute bombshell of a report in the Miami Herald. It blew the lid off that secret deal. The public went ballistic. And all that pressure worked. In 2019, Jeffrey Epstein was arrested again, this time on federal charges. And that brings us right back to where we began, with him dead in that jail cell. But even his death didn't end this story. The shockwaves are still being felt right now. So Epstein himself never faced a trial. He died before that could happen. But the FBI didn't just pack up and go home. They kept digging. And about a year later, they found her, his #1 partner, Ghislaine Maxwell. She was hiding out in the middle of nowhere in New Hampshire. And this time, there was no escape. Maxwell went to trial. Survivors gave incredibly powerful, gut-wrenching testimony about what she did. And she was found guilty. In June of 2022, she was sentenced to 20 years behind bars. Now, obviously, no amount of money can ever fix the harm that was done, but there was at least some financial justice. A fund was set up using Epstein's massive fortune, and it ended up paying out over $121 million to more than 150 survivors. And the public pressure for more answers? It hasn't gone away. In fact, it's gotten stronger, and it's coming from all sides of the political aisle. It led to something called the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Basically, it forces the government to start releasing thousands and thousands of pages of documents that were sealed, with a hard deadline of December 19, 2025. But here's the thing that's just mind-boggling. Even with all the documents that have come out recently, experts estimate there are still over 1 million pages of files that are sealed. 1 million pages about his network, his money, his connections, all of it hidden away. It just shows you how much we still don't know. You know, if there's one thing this whole insane story teaches us, it's this. Power and money, they can hide a crime for a long, long time. But they can't make it disappear forever. The truth has a funny way of fighting its way out no matter how deep it's buried. So that's where we are now. And we're left with the same questions that have been haunting this case from the very beginning. Epstein is gone, Maxwell is in prison, but with over 1 million pages of secrets still locked up, you have to ask yourself, who else's name is in those files? What other secrets are being protected? And will we ever, ever know the whole truth?